From the NXT studio in Southern California, this is the Power and Market Report. I'm your host, Albert Liu. My guest today is Jayant Bhandari. He's an analyst in the natural resources sector who has worked for Casey Research and U.S. Global Investors. He's also the founder of the annual seminar, Capitalism and Morality. Jayant, thanks for joining me once again on the Power and Market Report. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Albert. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Great. It's great to have you back on. You were, as I was just mentioning before we started, a very popular interview on this channel. And I think it's because you speak your mind in a time when most people feel they can't. I know that people don't always agree with you, but we always appreciate your thoughts and remarks. I want to start, as you are a mining analyst, I want to start on the topic of gold. We have gold, I guess, trending downward this year after a pretty good rally at the end of last year. So we reached a high sometime in January, I believe. We've been trending downward since then. I want to get your opinion on what the move in the gold price, or the lack of the move up, has done to the mining sector. How are companies hanging in there given the trend we see right now?
There are indeed, Albert, a lot of gold mining companies that offer extremely good valuations. So I am all in. I'm invested in these companies, and I don't wait for a so-called bottom. I'm not waiting for any technical signals. And I think waiting for technical signals does not work. You have to invest in these companies when you see value in these companies. Now, it is indeed true that gold hasn't really done very well, which means that there is a lot of pessimism in the market. But the reality is that the whole of the economic situation in the world is very chaotic. So no one really knows what is going to do well in the future, and people are very scared about everything: currencies, gold, stock market, property market, and jurisdictions. So I think I am just keen on investing for value, and I think I will do well if I keep investing based on value.
There must be some, for most investors, there must be some built-in assumptions, whether we like to or not, about how long, I guess, we're going to be trending around between 1250 and 1300. Do you have a built-in expectation for how long we're going to be in this trading range?
I don't really care much about gold price when I'm analyzing gold mining companies. As long as they offer me value at the current gold price, I'm happy to invest in them and wait for my value to get triggered eventually. It usually gets triggered anyway. So I think what people wait for is that they wait for gold price to move up before they start investing in these companies. And that actually doesn't work. That's actually a way to buy high and sell low. You have to invest now, not worry about gold price. If you see value at the current gold price, just go in for it.
Do you also cover base metal?
I cover. I would invest in anything that would make money for me. When I invest in mining companies or in property companies or any other sector, my sole purpose is to make money. And it does not really matter to me whether it's gold or commodities or properties.
Shifting over to the broader market, Jayant, we have not a good month of May for the major index, but in general, very good performance from the stock market if you go back, I guess, to the beginning of the year. What are your thoughts on the broader markets and how they affect, I guess, the enthusiasm and the psychology of mining investors?
I have been to 3 mining conferences in the last 2 weeks, Albert, and there is a huge amount of pessimism among investors in the mining sector, and the mining companies are facing a huge amount of problems raising money from investors. And there is a lot of pessimism related with the U.S. China trade war. People are worried that U.S. will start to slow down as a result of the trade war. People are, of course, worried about China slowing down as a result of the trade war. And that is the pessimism that is engulfing this sector. And I think also the broader stock market. The reason why, as you can see, Chinese stock market has fallen a lot, Hong Kong stock market has fallen a lot, and I think other East Asian markets are falling as well. But I think a lot of this is based on short-term fear, which, in my view, will blow up in a few months' time. I still continue to be optimistic that this trade war will go away.
So when you say blow up, you mean blow off, dissipate. You're not worried about, for instance, the tariffs expanding.
Well, certainly it is not a huge problem for the US. I think the media wants to show Trump in bad light. So the media wants to exaggerate the harm that this trade war will do to the US. China will suffer hugely if it continues to fight this trade war. And I think Xi Jinping is being a bit egocentric, probably quite a bit egocentric, in taking this to a bad conclusion. He will have to pull back at some point of time. The problem with him is that he has to save his face before, in a way, he has to pull back in a way that he does not lose his face. So he has put himself into a huge problem there.
I wonder, one of the headlines that came across today was sort of the strategic nature of rare earth elements, and China being a leading producer of those elements. Do you think that this is something that the U.S. should really be concerned about, or is this just talk at this point?
I think it's absolutely just talk, and I think the media wants to show Trump in bad light. From what I recall, when U.S. imposed the initial list of restrictions of imports from China, they wanted to restrict imports of REs from China. US does not seem to be too worried about it. But moreover, Albert, the total imports of REs to the US is very limited. It's about $160 million a year. It's a very small fraction of total imports into the US. And if China starts to restrict exports of commodities to the US, as has historically happened, smuggling will pick up. So I don't think any kind of export restrictions by China of rare earths will affect the US consumption.
I want to talk a little bit about technology, Jayant, because intellectual property has been one of the key issues in dispute. In interviews in the past, we've discussed how sort of technology transfers have been very important in terms of elevating the third world into developed nations. Is what going on here really a race to the top for technology? Is that what we're really talking about here? Not trade on a whole, but trade in certain strategic, I think, areas, both deemed by both the U.S. and China?
Well, China certainly shortchanges the US and other Western countries when it imports and copies technologies of the Western countries. China should be thankful that China has benefited hugely from all this import. Chinese students get educated in the Western countries, they return back and start a large number of high technology companies in China. So yes, China has been a huge beneficiary, but I think that gratitude might have gone away over a period of time. And that's where you see that there is a huge surge in nationalism in China. I hope China does not take the path of suicide by becoming too ungrateful and by trying to think that it can fight with the US. It will not work out very well for China.
What, in your opinion, would be, I guess, the welcome way for them to express their gratitude, Jayant?
Well, I think what Trump basically wanted was a fair trade with China. And a fair trade means that there should be a level playing field between the two countries. America has been in continual trade deficit with China, and China does impose a lot of restrictions on American companies and American imports. Now, Albert, as you know, I'm a huge fan of China. I think China is the future of humanity, and Chinese should try to understand that they should have a rational trade with the Western countries to become another Western country. China is the only possibility among these second and third world countries to become a first world nation, and they should not destroy this possibility by fighting with the Western countries. It is too early for China to start thinking that they can do it alone. They can't.
So I've had a similar discussion with Don Luskin, and I guess the point of contention between us was I agreed with him. He was making your point precisely. And I agreed with him that everyone, or most people, would be better off if China were more free and traded more freely, bidirectionally. My question, though, is this the best way to bring that about? Meaning Trump's approach to it, the trade war. Is this because in the short term that penalizes Americans? So in your view, is this the right way to go about opening that market?
Well, firstly, I don't think it penalizes Americans too much. The restrictions that America has imposed is a very small part of American economy. And America can, of course, import the same goods from many other countries. So my view is that it probably does not put America into too many problems. But moreover, if you look at countries like Iceland, Japan, or Switzerland, they actually have import restrictions. They have restrictions on bringing in cheap labor into their countries, which actually helps the underclass of these countries. So putting restrictions of trade of low value added commodities into America might actually help the underclass in America. And you can already see that happening in America in the sense that unemployment is at its lowest in many decades now. So of course, any kind of trade war harms both the parties, but it will harm China a lot more than it will harm the United States.
Even if that's true, Jayant, and we're going to get to this later, you're the founder of Capitalism and Morality. We're talking about government power here. Do you think that that's a moral use, or is this an impossible question to answer? Is that a moral use of government authority? Keeping one American from purchasing a product from someone in China?
Well, the moment you have accepted the concept of the state, you have to accept that there will be collateral damage. The state does everything in a collective fashion, which means that there will always be winners and there will always be some losers. And that is why the libertarian approach is the best approach, which is an approach of having no state. We should move towards a minimalist state and hopefully no government in human society. But until the time that we have, any decision any government takes will have its collateral damage as well.
Thanks for that, Jayant. I want to get to your conference now. Capitalism and Morality is going to take place in Vancouver, Saturday, August 3rd, 2019. Jayant, I want you to tell the viewers about this conference, but I want to share with you some discussions I have because I always go early to that conference to attend the Sprott conference. And so I'm hanging around, and sometimes people ask me, as I'm in the tourist areas of Vancouver, what I'm doing. And when I mentioned that I'm attending a conference called Capitalism and Morality, they seem to think that this is a built-in contradiction, that capitalism and morality are not compatible, they're contradictory. Can you explain the genesis of this conference to the people who don't know about it and explain what it is you're trying to achieve there?
Well, I use this term from the works of Ayn Rand. And for me, capitalism is the only moral way for human beings to transact and interact with each other. free market. Without the free market, what you have is one person dominating his views on the other person. And that is where there is a lot of confusion in today's society, because they think that a regulated market or a market that is collectivized is somehow more moral, which actually isn't the case. It is through the free market and through capitalism that we can have a moral way of interacting with each other.
What do you say to the objection that capitalism is immoral? What you see happening with big banks and people with influence taking advantage of regular folk, that is the furthest thing from moral behavior. How would you respond to that criticism?
Well, absolutely. And that is indeed happening. And that is not capitalism. That is mostly happening because these people are supported by people in the government. And the moment you have a big government, big companies want to make their life easy by getting into bed with the governments. So what you want is minimal regulations, minimal possibility of government interfering in lives of people, which will actually reduce the influence of banks and big corporations in the lives of people. And that will actually improve competition, improve pricing power, and it will ultimately help the consumer. And moreover, banking system is a crazy system, Albert. It is all based on fiat currency today, which is 100% a government-based system, a paper-based system. There is no backing of this currency, and everything is based on regulations created by the government.
Would it be possible that a system like the one you described would just descend into chaos? Would it be chaos and morality, or capitalism and chaos, rather than what you just described?
Well, I mean, the fiat currency system will ultimately get into a horrendous chaos because there is no monetary system, no sane monetary system that the world has today. It is all based on paper currency. Most of the third world countries are facing huge inflation. Look at Venezuela, look at Argentina, look at Turkey. There are a lot of problems created by this fiat currency system. This must come to an end at some point of time. And that is exactly why the US dollar is doing so well right now, because all these people fearful of the paper currencies they hold want to buy US dollar, but eventually US dollar also is based on paper currency, and it must come to an end at some point of time. And that is why, Albert, you and I like to keep some of our wealth in gold, because we think that having something real in our hands is much better than having paper currency in our possession.
So what kind of speakers can we expect at the Capitalism and Morality Conference this year?
Well, we have the usual ones: Rick Rule, Doug Casey, Adrian Day. Dr. Ian Plimer is coming from Australia. Rakesh Wadhwa is coming from Dubai. There are about 13 speakers at the conference.
And what kind of topics will we be addressing?
We want to talk about immigration. We want to talk about racism in the United States. We want to talk about the third world countries. We want to talk about all the topics that other forums don't talk about. This is a place where people speak and discuss freely about issues that are usually no longer discussed anywhere in the world.
I would say almost never discussed as far as I can see. Anyway, Jayant, I want to put out a strong call actually for anyone who's interested in these things to come and join us. It's really fun. And Jayant, the way that I describe your conference, because it's one of the few that is really like this in terms of free flow of information, is mixed martial arts. This is mixed mental arts, where people from all walks of life, different backgrounds, different ideas. It's certainly not just you and Doug Casey preaching to the choir. There are a lot of different ideas there, and people are free to express themselves however they whatever style they want to get their ideas across. Sometimes it's debate, sometimes it's pure lecture, sometimes it's conversational, and I really enjoy it. So I encourage everyone to check it out. JayantBhandari.com is where you'd go for information on tickets. Jayant, I want to thank you for joining me again on the reboot of the show. Really appreciate it. For everyone watching, like I said, JayantBhandari.com is where you can find out more about Jayant. See his latest articles. For instance, Commodity Price Speculation is Gambling, which is published at miningjournal.com, and The Decline of India, which was published at internationalman.com. Jayant, thank you so much for joining me again, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks for having me, Albert.
I'm like burning up here. There must be like tons of reflections. Sure. I think if we open that door, I'm under hot lights, and I'm just dying here. I don't hear it at all. I don't hear it in my earpiece. I mean, I hear it, but I don't hear it in my earpiece.
Yeah, I think we can just keep it on.